Greetings from the City of London. I've literally walked to the left of Buckingham Palace down a road called Buckingham Gate, and along there stands a site, I think, which is quite significant in the history of the Indian independence movement. Now, in 1919, on the 13th of April, a massacre occurred in Amritsar, which was known by the name of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. It really was a massacre when you think about how unarmed protesters were fired on, who were protesting against the arrests of Dr. Saifuddin Kichlo and Dr. Satyapal. They were fired upon under the orders of Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer. The man on the ground was Reginald Dyer, who carried those orders out, but those orders were given by the Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer, and I'll explain a bit more about him later on. But where I'm standing now, not too far from Buckingham Palace in fact, stands the site of where a revolutionary by the name of Udham Singh on the 13th of March 1940 arrived here and shot and killed Michael O'Dwyer. It was at Caxton Hall that he arrived with a revolver hidden in a book, and I'm standing opposite Caxton Hall, which I'll just show you here, and you can see the sign, the 10 Caxton Hall, in ink that's written here. But this, from what I've been told, is the original building that still stands here. So the facade of it is still the same. What they've done is they've changed the layout from inside because now it's been converted into flats. But this is the actual site. And I'll try and get some video footage of the whole building if I can, because it's quite a tall building and it's difficult to capture. I think this is the actual building where Udham Singh walked in on that fateful day and shot Michael O'Dwyer twice, once in the heart, once in the lung, right lung I think it was, and Michael O'Dwyer died. I can't exactly go in because these are someone's flats, but just to show you what it's turned into now. So he would have walked through these doors into the Great Hall and shot Michael O'Dwyer. Now, that incident I think really shook the British Empire to the core, especially British rule in India, because after that a lot of revolutionary activities took place. And recently I was in the Shaheed Udham Singh birthplace, and that was an act that also happened after the massacre, because Shaheed Udham Singh was executed in 1931. And just to look at this Caxton Hall, I think if you ever anyone is down here that's interested in the history of the Indian independence movement, then I think it's something that should be seen, because it's something associated with India, within the independence movement. There's been a lot of films as well that have been made about this subject of Shaheed Udham Singh. What I will say is the one that's been made recently that stars Vicky Kaushal, that's the one worth watching, I think, because they've captured the massacre in detail. The footage is very graphic, so if you're of a nervous disposition, I wouldn't watch that part. But I think for education and learning, I think that scene really has to be seen, because the films that have been done prior to that haven't really featured graphic detail in terms of showing the massacre. They featured Udham Singh's life and what led to the build-up, but they haven't featured anything that shows the massacre in detail. Even the Richard Attenborough directed film Gandhi only featured it maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds maximum, and it wasn't really in any great detail. But I think this shows the massacre in great detail, and I think it's something that I think needs to be watched if you're interested in that subject. But I'll just walk past Caxton Hall again, because it is quite a large building. It actually goes to one corner of Caxton Street, which is here. I can just see it. It's quite a interesting building. I'm not sure what it quite dates back to. It's got basements as well, which you can see here. I mean, these are somebody's living rooms now, so I'll try and be a bit careful. I don't want to be reported to the police here. And just looking at the building, it just carries on. And actually I've seen a plaque here as well, so let's have a look at what the plaque reads. So it says on here, Westminster City Council, Sir Winston Churchill spoke here at the former Caxton Hall, 1937 to 1942. So there's no real mention of Udham Singh shooting Michael O'Dwyer, which I'm not surprised at, because when the incident happened, it's something that they tried to cover, and it's something that they tried to hush because they didn't want it, because it would have reverberated around India and it would have caused a lot more conflict to happen there, which in effect it did anyway, because when Shaheed Udham Singh's trial, a lot of his speech got out because there were people, journalists, etc., who were there sitting in the audience, and they captured a lot of what he said, and a lot of that speech made it back. I just noticed another sign actually as I was walking past. It's quite cold today actually, so the wind's actually blowing quite vigorously, and I'm trying to get some areas where there's not much wind, but I can see just a sign I noticed just as I was walking past. It actually says here, the Town Hall, Westminster. This foundation stone was laid March 29th, 1882 by the Baroness Burdett Coutts, youngest daughter of the late Sir Francis Burdett, Member of Parliament for the city, John Harris Clerk to the Vestry and District Board of Works, Lee and Smith Architects, W&D McGregor Builders. And 1882 is when this building was first started. I'm not sure if it was finished in 1882, because it does say the stone was laid in 1882. So it's an interesting building nonetheless. Interesting in terms of that it's associated with such an event, such an act that a lot of people in India would know about. A lot of people outside India would also know that something like this happened. One of the most interesting things I think that this led to was I think that Britain after this knew that I think the writing was on the wall, and a lot of things actually ended up happening because of this. And I think it's sped up, I think, Indian independence. Another thing that I just remembered whilst mentioning the name Michael O'Dwyer, one confusing thing that does happen, I've noticed this a lot with Indian friends and colleagues. The names are quite similar, Michael O'Dwyer and Reginald Dyer. So the O'Dwyer and Dyer generally get mixed up. So if you ask a person who died, they will say Dyer. Dyer, who was the man on the ground, the general, actually died about roughly 8 years later of natural causes. He, by all accounts, was consumed by this, and it affected him quite a lot. Michael O'Dwyer lived out a lot of his life, and back in England got used to doing a lot of speeches, a lot of events, public speaking, and I'm not sure if it affected him, because one of the things that he did say, and it's on recorded history, was that if ever there was to be a Holocaust, then it should be in Amritsar, because he thought that would protect the empire. Now, this was before the Nazi Germany Holocaust. Any sort of Holocaust, when you think about it in today's terms, is bad, and even in those days it was bad. So I think just that wording alone, a lot of people do say that he was also consumed by guilt, but I think, if you say those words, that if ever there was a Holocaust, it should happen in Amritsar, well, I'm not sure if that's going to consume you. You've gone out there with the intention of killing people, which you thought would save the empire. So that act in itself, and I think a lot of the words that have been spoken after, a lot of the recorded history of the time, and this is available in across the media, and I think that's something I think that also needs to be taken into account, because a lot of people tend to get sympathetic over time, which is it's anyone's right, but I think if you analyze it in the course of what happened at that time, and the incident that happened, and just the kind of reaction that it led to, in today's day and age, if you were to just fire at 1,000 unarmed protesters, imagine the furor that would happen. This was something that was covered up at the time, and they tried to pass this off as a minimal normal event that had taken place, but it wasn't. And I think just it leading up to Michael O'Dwyer's death, you can tell that it was something that hurt the people who were there. By all accounts, Shaheed Udham Singh was at the Jallianwala Bagh when it happened. I think he was giving water to people who were there, this is what's been noted down in history, so I'll go along with that. I haven't got anything to kind of veer away from there, but just reading around the history, looking at the history, I think it's something that a place, I think, that if you're interested in the history of the Indian independence movement, then I think it's something that you should come down. Not too far from Buckingham Palace. You could walk here from, I think the closest station is St James's Park, but if you are anywhere near Buckingham Palace, then definitely it's something that's worth seeing. An incident that's gone down in history has happened there. There's been films on the subject, there's been books on the subject, so I think it's something that you know, if you are down, come here, pay your respects to an act that happened here. Come and see the building. You won't be allowed in unless you break in, but I think it's something that needs to be seen, and something that I think is worth exploring and marking off on your trip in London, because let's be honest, everyone sees Buckingham Palace and Trafalgar Square and Leicester Square and Piccadilly Circus and takes those Instagrammable photos, but I would say come down here, have a look and learn a bit of Indian history. I have managed to teleport myself from 10 Caxton Hall to Brookwood Cemetery, which is in the town of Woking in the county of Surrey. Well, not teleport, but you get the gist. So I've made my way from 10 Caxton Hall to Brookwood Cemetery because this cemetery contains the grave of Michael O'Dwyer. After his shooting at 10 Caxton Hall, his body was brought here for burial, and this is where his final resting place is. I actually was expecting something a bit more grand as far as headstones are concerned, or a mausoleum maybe, but that was, you know, before I knew where his burial place was, because he played quite a significant role in the massacre, and he was actually thought of quite highly by the British authorities. He is actually buried here in the Roman Catholic part of the cemetery. The cemetery actually is quite large, and it takes quite a while to find his grave, because a lot of the graves that are in this area, there's no markings on them, and it's very difficult to see what's written on them, and it's something that took me a bit of time to find, but I found it, and I'll just show you the grave as it is. The writing's still legible on there, and he's buried alongside a couple of members of his family as well. So this is the grave of Michael O'Dwyer. This is his final resting place, and if I could just read the writing on here: Michael Francis O'Dwyer, CCIEKCSI, Knight of St John, died March 13th, 1940, aged 75 years, a follower of God and a leader of men. He served India for 55 years, he lived for India, he died for India. Make him to be remembered with thy saints in glory everlasting. Uno O'Dwyer, OBE, died November 26, 1956, age 84 years. So I think it's both burial grounds for Michael O'Dwyer and his wife. Just alongside here, there's a couple of other O'Dwyers as well. One is Maliki O'Dwyer, died faint, so April 1929, I think, and John Chevalier O'Dwyer, OBE, 1900 to 19. The writing's off. I can't see that, but there's another. So there's four O'Dwyers that are buried here. Michael O'Dwyer being one of them. The man responsible for an infamous act in Jallianwala Bagh on the 13th of April 1919. It's forever written in history, and that completes my journey, I think. I've been to Jallianwala Bagh a few times, so the next time that I go there I will try and film some footage, because it is something that needs to be remembered and something to be shown. It's in a lot of films, like I said earlier. A lot of books have been written about it, a lot of articles on it, and it's something that appears in the media every now and again. There's always a remembrance of that day that takes place, and it's actually quite a nice day here today as well, which is very, very fortunate. Last thing we want is a bit of rain here. Would have made it very muddy, but this cemetery actually is quite big, and it's it's taken a bit of time to get around it. Until the next time, from Brookwood Cemetery in Woking, ciao.